Hey guys, welcome back to the tennis vlog for the first preview and predictions video of the Australian Open. Right at the back end of the event, I've left it as late as possible. Semi-finals time. My flags are dropping already. Spent so long setting this up, but here we go. Men's and women's semi-finals coming up, starting tomorrow with the women's semi-finals and the first men's semi-final. Don't know why they do it like this in Melbourne, but there's always one men's semi played the day before the next one. So it does mean we all get more sleep the following day, but apart from that, don't really see the benefits. So I'm here to preview and predict all 4 matches, and I'm just going to plunge straight in before we waste too much time, starting with the women's matches and then going on to the men's matches if you're coming at a later date and want to skip through. I'm not going to make you watch the whole video if you don't want to, so let's just get going. Starting with top seed, Ashleigh Barty's clash with the number 14 seed, Sofia Kenin. There is a tradition, a theme at the Australian Open of a rising WTA star making their debut Grand Slam semi-final at the Australian Open. It's been going on since, I think, 2012, 2013, when Sloane Stephens made it for the first time, followed by Eugenie Bouchard, and it just goes on and on. Madison Keys, Johanna Konta, Danielle Collins. Last year, it was Danielle Collins. Year before that, Elise Mertens. It's a thing that is happening. Sofia Kenin steps into those shoes this year. Credit to her. And Barty here for the first time as well. So a first-time Melbourne semi-final for both women. Let's see how they got here. Starting with Barty herself, let's go for the top seed. Bit of a struggle in the first round at first. Obviously home expectation for Barty, and traditionally Australian women have not performed well here. I think Barty is the first Australian woman into the semi-finals here in round about 30 years, so credit to her. 5-7, she lost the first set against Ligia Sorenko in round 1, but came through 5-7, 6-1, 6-1. Followed that up with a far more convincing victory over Polona Herzog, 6-1, 6-4. Elena Rybakina, the number 29 seed, was her opponent in the third round. Rybakina made back-to-back finals coming into this tournament, so she was very much in form, but Barty dismissed her 6-3, 6-2, despite an interesting opening to that encounter, pretty tight. Got tighter in the fourth round against Alison Riske, who took Barty out of Wimbledon. Riske is... I'll talk about her a bit more in a minute because I'm going to make some comparisons, but Barty came through that one ultimately 6-3, 1-6, 6-4. No tie breaks there, so almost looks a convincing victory, but actually those latter stages were a lot tighter than the scoreline lets on. Barty did have a healthier lead in the third set and had to grit it out to come through, and actually broke serve on a double fault to come through that match. So that one was challenging. But then she went on to her quarterfinal against Petra Kvitova, the number 7 seed, and I'll do some analysis on this match as we speak about it. Going into this match and into indeed the rest of the tournament as a whole, with so many seeds dropping and so many upsets, a lot of people were calling Barty the favourite to win the tournament, which I understood, and she was definitely up there as a lead contender for me. The courts are playing a bit slower here in Melbourne than I expected at the outset of the tournament. And Barty, anyway, has a game that can thrive on all surfaces. She was taking everything in her stride, but I was hesitant to call her the outright favourite before she faced off with Kvitova because of the mammoth tussles these two have had in recent times, because it was indeed Kvitova that took Barty out of the tournament last year. And when Kvitova is firing, we know what lethal damage she is capable of. She is... Her and Serena Williams, I would say, are the only two players who, when they are playing at their maximum potential, they have the match on their racket from the first point to the last, I would say. With Kvitova and Serena, they are that brutal and that lethal when they're finding their marks. So that was going to be a real challenge for Barty. Kvitova did have the fastest start, and she was cutting through that court and making it look like a much faster surface, and it would have been easy for a lot of players to panic in that situation with everything that was on the line as well. Barty just showed exactly what she's made of, even as Kvitova produced some brilliant execution and made her way into the baseline, finished things off from the forecourt. Barty kept her head down. She stayed focused on herself and her own game. She stayed in the moment because against players like Kvitova, there is always the possibility of her malfunctioning, going off the rails. And after Barty had edged an incredibly tight first set, 8-6 in the tiebreak, Kvitova did fall away at the beginning of the second. And once again, Barty's presence of mind and her smartness on the courts enabled her to take advantage. So that was a deeply impressive performance from Barty for me, particularly as she was looking at making the semi-finals at her home Grand Slam for the first time. So that left me incredibly convinced by Barty, and if she can keep up that mentality, she's going to be tough to stop. But she is the heavy favourite in this clash with Kenin, and it will remain to be seen how she does handle that and whether she can take that in her stride. Because Kenin, essentially, apart from a Grand Slam semi, has so much less to lose than Barty. There is a lot less expectation riding on her, despite the fact that she's progressed through this tournament pretty seamlessly. Straight sets wins to open round 1 and 2, wasn't pushed beyond 4, well, didn't lose more than 4 games in a set. Then she faced Zhang Shui in round 3, 2 tight sets, but again she was able to step up and have the mental edge in those big moments and came through 7-5, 7-6. That was a 9-7 tiebreak as well, so really high pressure moments. Then she faced her 4th round opponent, Coco Gauff, who needs no introduction. Gauff had taken out Osaka in what was a terribly poor performance from Osaka, who quite simply could not handle the pressure and the expectation of that clash. And Kenin showed exactly what she's made of. I think Kenin has been overshadowed by other rising players. You know, she's still only 20, 21 years old. She's still on the rise, but her game isn't as in your face as a lot of the other rising stars. But what stands out about Kenin is she's uber confident. She's so composed and so able with her own game and has total belief in herself, and I think that really showed itself against Gauff, because the big issue when players come up against Gauff is, oh no, it's a 15-year-old, she's super hyped, everyone's saying she's so good, I don't want to lose, and they can't handle that, but Kenin did. Lost the first set narrowly in a tiebreak, but sailed through the last 2 sets 6-3 and 6-love, and that propelled her into her quarter-final match with Ons Jabeur of Tunisia, who'd been having a great tournament, taken out a couple of big names. That was a potentially really tricky clash, and honestly, I expected it to go to 3 sets. Jabeur has a lot of layers to her game. She has the backhand slice that can extend the rallies and throw her opponents off. She has the drop shot as well. But there were a lot of baseline exchanges in this one, and while Kenin probably didn't produce her best tennis, she really rose up when her back was against the wall, incredibly gritty, but also spied her opportunities in a moment and was quick to race into the court and put shots away. Often Jabeur was forcing her to play the extra shot with the 1-2 punches. She was often forced to hit a 3rd shot, and she committed to that no problem. So I think all in all, while there were ups and downs for Kenin in that match, she did really well to close it out in straight sets, 6-4, 6-4. Now, moving into her match with Barty, obviously Barty is the heavy favourite and she leads their head-to-head 4-1, but this could potentially get more complicated than people anticipate just because of the mental situation for Barty. That is an aspect of her game that Barty's improved tremendously over the past season, which is why she rose from outside the top 10 to being world number 1 and a Grand Slam champion last year. She really got her head game in the place it needed to be. But you know, there is still a huge amount of pressure here, and she has to be able to take that in her stride. I'd say Kenin is a very different opponent for Barty compared to Kvitova. Kvitova produces all the pace, and you can essentially use her pace, and you have to rise to hang with her. You barely have the opportunity to slow things down, and Barty has a lot in her repertoire, the slice coming to the net, but she really did have to go toe-to-toe quite quickly with Kvitova. Kenin has a slower ground stroke speed and plays with more topspin, so what Kenin is going to do that Kvitova probably couldn't is she's going to have the ability to bring consistency over a longer period of time. And that's going to give Barty more time to think. And it's really going to test where Barty's consistency is at. So their most recent meeting, these two, came in Wuhan last year. So that was on a hard court outdoors. Barty won that one in straight sets, 6-3, 7-5. But their meeting before that was also in 2019, and just saying, their 5 meetings have all come since the beginning of 2018, so in recent times. Their meeting in Toronto was won by Kenin, so that was the summer of last year, the Canadian summer. 6-7, 6-3, 6-4 in the second round to Kenin. And obviously Barty, by that point, had been world number 1, was a Grand Slam champion. So she still had the status and the form that she brings into their match now. Prior to that, Barty had beaten Kenin on her run to the French Open title, but that was also in 3 sets. And then in the 2 meetings prior to that, in 2019 and 2018, Barty had won in straights. So but without beating around the bush too much, I think Barty will and should win this match. She's a step up in terms of experience. She's got a good team of people around her. She certainly seemed very relaxed after her win over Kvitova. And I think she's just in a very relaxed and very happy place in her life. Remember, she left tennis all those years ago because she couldn't handle the expectation, because she didn't like the pressure, because she wasn't enjoying herself. But it certainly seems as though the tables have dramatically turned for Barty. So she's in a great place. But like I say, Kenin comes into this match having less to lose and having a game style that can and has troubled Barty in the past. So my instinct is to predict Barty to win this one. Instinctively, I was going to go straight sets. I think that Kenin has proven both in this tournament and previously that she can take this one the distance and give herself chances. But just because my instinct was that Barty was playing so much better, I'm going to say Barty in straights. These 2 matches, the Kenin versus Jabeur match and the Barty versus Kvitova match, were back-to-back. And I mean, Kvitova's form dropped after the first set against Barty, but you could see the change in quality. And that's not to say that Kenin played a poor quality match at all. It's just to say that Barty and Kvitova showed exactly why they have won Grand Slam titles. So I'm going to leave that one there because honestly, I could talk more, but there's not much else that you'd really be interested in hearing. So Barty in straight sets, I think, for that one, although I really do feel that Kenin can take it 3 and go the distance there. Okay, moving on to a harder one in Simona Halep versus Garbine Muguruza. Really interesting matchup, this one. Halep and Muguruza. Halep turned pro several years before Muguruza and is slightly older, but these two were rising at pretty much the same time. They were taking the same kind of steps, and Muguruza ended up winning her first Grand Slam before Halep won hers. So it's been an interesting path that I'll speak more about when we come to look at their head-to-head. But starting off, let's see how they've progressed through the tournament. Let's start with the non-seeder Muguruza, who is non-seeded as a multi-time slam champ because the last season and a half have been really rough for her, really been struggling to find form despite her obvious talents. And those of you that have followed this channel will know that all through last season, I was predicting her to make a run at a Grand Slam, suddenly rediscover herself. When that didn't happen, I left her by the wayside at the beginning of this event, and boy, was I wrong to do that. She has come to life in Melbourne, so let's start with Muguruza. She didn't come to life straight away, though. She lost her first set of the tournament, 6-love, to heavy-hitting American Shelby Rogers, but bounced back in style for the win. Love 6, 6-1, 6-love. Ayla Tomljanovic was her opponent in the second round. I seem to remember watching bits of that one. Tomljanovic in probably the best form of her life. She was a rising teenager with eyes on her as well, but has had a lot of injury since then. Muguruza, that was a good win for her, coming through 6-3, 3-6, 6-3, but her most impressive win, I think the win that put her on people's radars, was in the third round over the number 5 seed Alina Svitolina, thumping Svitolina 6-1, 6-2. A lot of people have Svitolina as a slam contender. She was incredibly consistent at the majors last season. So that was a real statement from Muguruza, and she backed that up against the number 9 seed Kiki Bertens in the 4th round. Bertens, initially a clay court specialist, but she's in the top 10 because she has been transferring her form to the hard courts as well. And Muguruza came through that one 6-3, 6-3, but her most recent win in the quarterfinals, taking her to 7 sets won, even on the trot, was over the number 30 seed Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, who'd been having quite the run here in Melbourne, had taken out Karolina Pliskova, someone else that I can't remember off the top of my head. By the way, I'm not sure if I'm less audible than usual or talking faster, but I'm so tired. I'm shattered. I felt dizzy with tiredness before I came here, so incorrect predictions, that's my excuse. But Muguruza winning that one 7-5, 6-3. I watched the majority of that clash. I think that both players were really going toe-to-toe at the beginning of things. Pavlyuchenkova's backhand has been doing a lot of damage this tournament, and she was hitting it strong and heavy. And a lot of the time, she was forcing errors just by pushing Muguruza back. Muguruza thrives when she can play an attacking game and move into the court. And in the end, she was able to do that enough and win quicker points in order to come through in straight sets. But, you know, Pavlyuchenkova was able to pull her around the court, and that was definitely a close first set that could have gone either way. So credit to Muguruza for coming through 7-5, 6-3 and showing us why she's won multiple slams. You know, she did manage to cut through that court, and this court has not been playing particularly fast throughout this event. So Muguruza through, and then we look at her upcoming opponent, Simona Halep, who has dropped 0 sets coming into the semis. So I think Halep's name was not so much named as a contender at the beginning of this tournament, but she certainly had eyes on her as the tournament has progressed. I've borne in mind that when she went on her run to the Wimbledon title last year, she was really not a contender coming into the event. She was seeded inside the top 10, but as a counterpuncher as well, wasn't necessarily picked to thrive on a grass court. So I think it bears similarities, this run here, compared to Wimbledon, because as well at Wimbledon she was on fire heading towards the finals. So Halep yet to really break stride. 7-6, 6-1 over Jennifer Brady in the first round. Brady had made waves ahead of this event. I think a few people might have had her as a dark horse, so that was a good win. Followed it up 6-2, 6-4 over Britain's Harriet Dart, which obviously she was expected to come through that one. Yulia Putintseva in the third round, another counterpuncher, very gritty, very feisty. 6-1, 6-4 for Halep. And then Elise Mertens in round 4. That one was actually a tough battle for Halep. Mertens beat Halep in the Qatar Open final last season in a match that was really highly regarded for the sheer quality of the tennis. Mertens is a player who doesn't mind going toe-to-toe with Halep and engaging in those long exchanges, and does have the sharpness off both wings to finish things off as well. So I think Halep did really well to finish that in straight sets, even though the sets were tight. 6-4, 6-4 for Halep on that occasion. And then she rolled past Anett Kontaveit 6-1, 6-1, less than an hour, no contest. Almost wasn't worth watching, to be honest with you. Kontaveit obviously looking at making a Grand Slam semi-final for the first time. And bless her, she was just the deer in the headlights. She was not ready for Halep's sheer consistency, which is surprising because you know what Halep's going to bring to the court. And Kontaveit has very fluid shots, really nice to watch, but she wasn't doing any damage with them. Halep was reading the serve very well to begin with, so she was right in position to be proactive on the return. She was very confident and thought her return placement through incredibly well, and that set her up to really get her teeth stuck into the rallies. And Kontaveit didn't really try that much. She went for the shorter angles to pull Halep from side to side, but the consistency wasn't there. She was overhitting a lot, and 6-1, 6-1 says that Halep was absolutely blazing. I didn't think she was terrific, but I thought she was very, very good. I thought that her serve was quite a weapon. She was finding the marks with it. And then obviously the return, she stepped up for those. And on the run, she had wheels, you know, she was all over that baseline and ready to finish things off. So that makes it really interesting moving into this clash with Muguruza, longtime rival, because these two are both in pretty good form. So let's have a look at the head-to-heads. Halep versus Muguruza. Muguruza leads by a narrow margin, 3-2, but Halep won their most recent meeting. This gets interesting. Okay, so first meeting was in 2014 in Wuhan. Muguruza won that one in 3 sets. That kind of set the tone for the rivalry, because I feel like when these two face off, there's not a clear winner, because you do have the power player versus the counterpuncher, two players that really do rate themselves against each other. They know that there's a 50-50 chance when they step on court. And I think that the last meeting, 2018 French Open, semi-final. So the last time they met, although it is coming up to 2 years ago, unbelievably, was in a Grand Slam semi. I remember predicting that one because I thought Muguruza was on her way to that title. I predicted Muguruza to win, and Halep won at 6-1 at 6-4. So that was a slap in the face. And then Halep did go on to win that trophy, full stop. So fair play. I think that was just me again thinking that Muguruza had such a slump in form. She had to come through at some points. These two have played each other across surfaces. Their match that actually got played before that one, well, completed even before that one at the French Open, was Cincinnati 2017. Muguruza won in thumping fashion, 6-1, 6-love. So that was on a hard court. However, that hard court was playing faster, I would say, than the hard court they will be facing off on in Melbourne. This is more of a gritty hard court. And as I say, I did not fully expect that coming into the event. They're going to be playing during the day, so maybe it'll be playing a bit faster, but here we have Muguruza, a player who thrives on being attacking and keeping the points short, bringing out those 1-2 punches, and Halep, who really reaches her peak when she's on the run, when the rallies are being extended. And yes, as she showed against Serena Williams in the Wimbledon final, she can play differently, but I think that Halep's go-to game style, the counterpunching, has been allowed to thrive so far at the Australian Open. It is a really tough one to call. I think I know where I'm going with it, because I had an instinctive feeling on this one, and usually that's the way I go. I think that while Halep was not, I don't think she was at her peak in her last match, even though it was 6-1, 6-1. I just don't think Kontaveit brought enough to the table, and she didn't properly look through her options. She was just caught off guard by Halep on that given day. I think in this clash against Muguruza, Halep has to play with less margin for error than she did against Kontaveit, because of potentially the nerves on Kontaveit's side of the net. There were shots that she sent her response to into the net that another player would have kept the ball in play and kept the rallies extended and just tested Halep a bit more. Muguruza is going to show her a different game style. I'd be surprised if we don't see her moving into the baseline. She's going to be using the cross-court forehand, the off forehand, and these are things that I think Halep will be ready for, given that they have faced off so many times. It's interesting to look at the pattern with these two in terms of their playing style and how they are as players. They're very different, but there have been patterns in their paths. For example, Muguruza won the French Open and then won Wimbledon the following year, and that's what Halep did. She won the French Open and then she won Wimbledon the following year. So they have been playing copycat, these two. But during that French Open tournament, where Muguruza lost to Halep, Halep went on to get the title, and it was not the first time she'd come close to the French Open title. She'd played 2 finals at Roland Garros previously. At the Australian Open, Muguruza has not been a standout name here before. This is her best run in Melbourne. Halep, meanwhile, made the final a couple of years ago, lost to Caroline Wozniacki. It was a close match, and in my personal opinion, if Halep had not been so fatigued, Wozniacki would still be slamless, because Halep had a really tough 10-8 in the third win over Lauren Davis earlier in that tournament. She'd spent a lot more time on court than Wozniacki that fortnight, and I do think that if she'd have been fitter, less fatigued, Halep would probably have had that title in the bag. And the reason I make reference to this is because at the French Open, she got close, and then she crossed the line. So I think that the same pattern may occur for Halep here. That's not me outright predicting her to win the tournament. I think if the final is Barty versus Halep, that's going to be rotten to call. I don't want to be calling that one, but I think I'll take Halep here. And if Muguruza moves through, hey, I've been calling her to do well at a slam again for a while, so got my back covered. Halep to win. Because it's so close, I'm very tempted to say this one in 3 sets. I think that if it does go 3, Muguruza will have more time to work out Halep's game and work out a way through, but then again, Halep is built to endure. So I think I will say Halep to win this one in 3 sets. And that's the women's down. So we move on to the halfway point and the men's semi-finals. I'm doing them in order of when they're being played. So we start with the big one. Novak Djokovic, the number 2 seed against the number 3 seed, Roger Federer. Many, many meetings have come and gone. I feel like I preview this matchup every other week. Head-to-head stands at 26-23 in the favour of Djokovic. They faced off barely a few weeks ago at the ATP finals, but we'll come to that one shortly. Let's start with, well, it's been a wild ride for one and a smooth ride for the other. Let's start with the smoother ride with Novak Djokovic. He did actually drop a set in his first round, and it was a tough first round. Djokovic starting against Jan-Lennard Struff, who was barely not seeded. Struff has a big serve and volley game. He came into the season in the form of his life, had a really strong 2019. I watched him a lot. Yeah, really heavy hitting that on this surface of Rod Laver Arena, that was going to be a handful for Djokovic, and that showed when he did lose a 6-2 third set, but he'd already done the hard work there, really, Djokovic, in getting the 2 sets to love lead. When one of the big 3 goes up 2 sets to love, unless it's Federer at Wimbledon, because we've seen some rather remarkable comebacks in recent times, mentally it's so to come back, but Djokovic won through in that one 7-6, 6-2, 2-6, 6-1. Since then has not dropped a set, so 6-1, 6-4, 6-2 over Tatsuma Ito, 6-3, 6-2, 6-2 over Yoshihito Nishioka. Then he faced his first seeded opponent in the 4th round, in number 14, Diego Schwartzman. That was going to be more of a close contest on a clay court. Schwartzman just not built to thrive against Djokovic in these conditions, and Djokovic winning 6-3, 6-4, 6-4. Then was Milos Raonic in the quarterfinals, and this was the one I highlighted as, if a clash is going to trouble Djokovic, it will be here. Because if you watched my preview video for this tournament, you'll know that I had Raonic as my dark horse. He's performed well here before, went down in 5 sets in the semis in 2016, I believe to Andy Murray on that occasion, who is a player who can play with the same mannerisms as Djokovic. Raonic was the number 32 seed. He'd been serving like a dream, moving in, doing what he loves best, the serve and volley, playing at the nets. And if you're going to beat Djokovic, unless you are Nadal or Federer or someone of that prestige, you're not going to win from the baseline. You have to mix it up. You have to do something different. And Raonic could bring those elements to the table. But this was just an opportunity for Djokovic to show off what a good returner he is. Raonic first serve percentage was lower than he would have liked, to be fair, at 63. But Djokovic still won almost double the amount of receiving points that Raonic did. And came through that one in straight sets, 6-4, 6-3, 7-6, even as Raonic rained down 18 aces. So it's the power of timing for these guys as well. Djokovic would have known going into that clash that Raonic is a big hitter, that he is a big server, and he would have known not to beat himself up if he wasn't getting every return back in play. All you need is a good tiebreak or one good return game to see yourself through against these guys if you're as confident behind your own first serve as Djokovic clearly was. He won 84% of 70% of first serves landed during that match. So Yeah, good stuff from Djokovic. But moving on to Roger Federer, who has been the ATP name of this tournament because boy has he been involved in some drama on that tennis court. Let's start with some smoother matches. 6-3, 6-2, 6-2 over Steve Johnson and 6-1, 6-4, 6-1 over Filip Krajinovic in the first two rounds. No one could have seen what was coming. John Millman was always going to be a trickier opponent. He's gritty, he's got the crowd behind him. He'd beaten Roger Federer at a Grand Slam 2018 US Open in, to be fair, similar conditions to what Rod Laver Arena threw up on that given day. So the moment Federer went down a set, I knew he was in trouble. And to be honest, at the back of my mind, I thought he was going down because there's usually an upset. And Millman had the mentality, the form, the conditions to pull this off. And he very, very nearly did. And Federer looked as shocked as anyone else that he survived, but it has turned out to be huge. It was a 4-6, 7-6, 6-4, 4-6, 7-6 win for Federer, 10-8 in the super tiebreak, as they call it. Federer trailed 8-4, and he did his bit, you know, it wasn't lucky. I don't like to use the term luck in tennis because you're on that court, you play your shots, and the only real lucky way to get through a match is if your opponent just stands there and double faults or does what Naomi Osaka did against Coco Gauff, sends everything into the net. That's the only real way to win by luck, and Millman certainly didn't do that. He engaged with Federer a lot of times in the final set. He was dictating play, driving to the corners, and Federer kind of had to respond to what Millman was throwing at him. I'm doing more analysis on an earlier match than I have done for the other players, but I think this was a significant win for Federer, so we continue. Federer closed that gap in the super tiebreak with big serving. And that's been a key feature, I think, for Federer in recent years. You know, as he's got on and hasn't wanted to expend more energy, the variation on the serve, the first serve, the cheap serves to get him out of trouble have been key. And I think they were absolutely crucial in that super tiebreak to just keep him within touching distance and put Millman in the position where he had to think, where he had to step up and win that match. And he didn't. He started playing really not to lose, and it came down to the last couple of points, which Federer edged. So that was big for Federer mentally, but it didn't really show a ton in the fourth round when he lost the first set to Martin Fucsovics. Came through convincingly in the end, 4-6, 6-1, 6-2, 6-2. And Fucsovics is in good form, so don't read too much into that. But tennis Sandgren in the quarterfinals, wow, that was the story of the tournament. Federer saving, or rather Sandgren losing, 7 match points for Federer to come through 6-3, 2-6, 2-6, 7-6, 6-3. If it looked like Federer was going out to Millman, it sure as heck looked like he was going down here. It was early hours of the morning as this match was taking place. I'd been up all night watching the women's quarterfinals beforehand. I was taking notes throughout the majority of the clash, but when it got to match points to Sandgren in the fourth set, I sat there watching and waiting for it to be over because I was too tired and it was too fast-paced to keep taking notes. And it didn't finish, it went to a fifth. How did Sandgren get to that position, first of all? The pace he was producing was next level, consistently, every point, going for it again and again. But also his balance on the back foot. You know, Federer, we'd spoken about how Federer prefers pace, likes the pace. And he was playing during the day for the first time. There was a faster surface, of faster conditions. Sandgren loved that. He utilized that. And I think Federer found out that he was not loving the pace so much because Sandgren often took the racket out of Federer's hands, went toe-to-toe in the cross-court rallies, had tremendous balance on the back foot. So even as Federer stretched him out, he was straight back on his toes and running for the next ball. Wasn't intimidated by Federer's presence at the net, kept that ball low, and was really just loving the speed and thriving on it. In the second set and the third set, Federer really started feeling how the match, I think, was running away from him. He had an off-court medical timeout, and true, he was not moving, I don't think, at 100% during that match. There were probably an issue or two, but I do think there was an element of Federer just trying to slow play down there because it was quickly running away from him. And being the smart player, I guess, that he is, he knew he needed to do something to stop Sangren just slamming the lid and slamming the door on that clash, because he could so easily have done it, the American, if he had played the 1-2 punches, if he'd rained down the big serves the way he had done all match on any of his match points, he'd have been fine. And I think of the 7 match points, 5 of them at least ended on a Sangren unforced error, or a forced error, an error from the racket of Sangren anyway. There was one I particularly remember where Federer was brilliant, nerveless, relaxed, stepped up to fire a pass beyond Sangren as he was at the net. Sangren had been a real force up at the front of the court, so that was massive on Federer's part, but I think as the match went on, Sangren was playing so fast, Federer got tight, but when he was on the brink of defeat, it was kind of a now or never moment, and he did loosen up and go for his shots a lot more. And once he'd saved those match points and taken things to a 5th, it was going to take something phenomenal from Sangren to get back into that, because the crowd were roaring for Federer, the atmosphere was intense, and honestly, Sangren had done well to Sangren had done well to deal with that atmosphere and that situation for so long. I think mentally it was over for him when they went into that 5th set with him having had match points. So yeah, big stuff from Federer to come through that. Some of it was on Sangren's racket, some of it was on his own, but I think the main thing, the encouraging thing for Federer is that even when things looked completely out of his control, he hung around, he stayed in there, he waited for something to happen, he kept giving himself chances even when they didn't seem to be there, and then those chances came. So full credit, and it's a lot of talking done on that. So let's move on to previewing Djokovic versus Federer. And at this point, I'm going to take a drink because I can feel my mouth getting dry. Okay, so I'm not going to delve into the history because you can do that yourselves. I'm sure you have. You've probably watched many of their former clashes, as I have too. Let's just look at what is relevant. So their most recent meeting came on a hard court, indoors, NITO ATP Finals. That was Federer's first win over Djokovic in 5 meetings. It was 6-4, 6-3. And to be honest with you, Federer wipes the floor with Djokovic. It was one of those days where you saw just how Federer's lethal, slick, precise tennis can overpower Djokovic when he's in the mental headspace to produce. Admittedly, Djokovic was not in his best form at the back end of last year. I think he was starting to feel fatigue, feel a bit of tiredness, but it just went to show that in the earlier stages of tournaments, still, off the Grand Slam stage, Federer can beat Djokovic very convincingly. But their meeting before that was the Wimbledon final. Federer had 2 match points on serve, and Djokovic won by peaking tremendously at the big moments. He won 3 sets, all of them were tie breaks, and he won 13-12 in the decider. I don't think Federer fans will ever quite recover from that result. And it really could have been a make or break match, that one, at this stage in both of their careers, with not so much time left. I mean, I still think these two will both continue for a number of years, but, it is towards the back end now. And yeah, that was a big match because, I mean, I am like a stuck record, and people will know that before that final, I was saying Djokovic in 5 based on mentality, which is exactly what happens. And mentality does play a part here. I've always given Federer more chances against Djokovic ahead of a final, just because the trophy isn't on the line. That added pressure is relieved somewhat. And ahead of this tournament, I was saying that Djokovic was my instinctive frontrunner, but I had Federer as a very close second. And that remains the case. I really can see Federer winning this clash if he is as relaxed as he was in the latter stages against Sangren. Federer can really, if he comes in with the right mindset, look at any result from here as a bonus. Technically, he should almost have been out of the tournament twice, and he survived. So if he comes into this match swinging freely and finding his first serve, then there is every chance that he can come through here. But, Djokovic has just been so consistent, and there are a couple of injury concerns, fatigue concerns surrounding Federer as well. And while I'm not 100% sure how legitimate they are, that does have to be taken into consideration. This is a best of 5 set match we're looking at. I tend not to take tiredness, fitness into account so much when it comes to the big three, because they know each other so well, because they are so mentally strong compared to the rest of the field, because they are so physically superior. But, you know, in a Federer-Djokovic clash, that does have to be taken into consideration. So I could speak long and in depth about this clash. At the end of the day, I can summarize it by saying I think it could go either way. If Djokovic returns like he did against Raonic, Federer's going to have it tough. If Federer swings like he did against Sandgren in the latter stages, Djokovic is going to have it tough. I can definitely see Federer getting the win here, which might be surprising because I guess some people might be writing him off due to physical fitness or something like that. But I don't quite have the confidence to outright pick Federer over Djokovic. So I think on this occasion, I would say Djokovic to win this one in 4 sets. But if Federer does scoop the win, I am not surprised. So that's the Federer-Djokovic match predicted. And then I come to what I think really is the hardest clash to predict of all of these semi-finals. Dominic Thiem versus Alexander Zverev. This is the semi-final, the Grand Slam semi-final that has been anticipated for some time. For the last few years, Thiem and Zverev have been the bright hopes of the rising crop of ATP players. Thiem obviously a few years older, but he was more of a late bloomer than Zverev. So these two have taken steps side by side, and they're closely ranked at the moment. Dominic Thiem, the number 5 seed, Zverev, the number 7. They have had contrasting paths, but I think they've had contrasting paths, but I think equally impressive for different reasons. Okay, I'm going to go for Zverev first, who is seeded lower at number 7, and we're going to look at his path here. Started off against Marco Cecchinato, and this is the match that really opened my eyes to Zverev's potential at this tournament. Zverev won 6-4, 7-6, 6-3. Very important match for a few reasons. One, Zverev was not in good form coming into this event, had not had a great 2019 season. 2, Cecchinato, while he doesn't have great history outside of the French Open, is a Grand Slam semi-finalist, which is further in a slam than Zverev had got prior to this fortnight. And he's got a lot of depth in his game. He can change things up. He can give his opponents trouble on the court. And as far as his game style goes, he's a player that could really cause Zverev trouble. But Zverev comes through in straight sets. What that said to me was that what planet am I on? Zverev. What that said to me was that Zverev was in a much better headspace than he has been at a Grand Slam in a long, long time. Because usually coming into slams, you can already feel the 5-set question marks hanging around him. Can he break through? He gets the same pressure. He gets the same questions in press. He has the same people placing expectation on him. And I think, and I mentioned this actually in the Q&A video, that prior to this tournament, Zverev had put a post on social media, and he essentially said to everyone, look, everyone knows I'm not in great form at the moment, and chances aren't really high for me to win the Australian Open, but I can guarantee that I will give 110% to every match I play. And not just that post, but I think his mindset in general had taken a lot of internal pressure off Zverev's shoulders. I think over the years, because of the hype surrounding him in the media as well, he's been unable to not put expectations on himself. He's done well at Masters 1000 events. He's won the ATP finals. The natural next step is to make moves at a slam. And he was still so young because he'd been so successful at a young age. There was this expectation for him to thrive over the best of 5-set format when maybe he wasn't physically ready for that. So I think just coming into this tournament, Zverev's been in such a different mental headspace, and it can be kind of cliche and it can be an overused analogy, but you know, mentality is so much a part of this game, and for players at this level who've proven that they can go toe-to-toe with each other and they can beat anyone in the field, it really does come down to the mentality. And Zverev is so much more secure, so much more relaxed off the court, which translates to relaxed tennis on the court. and has looked imperious, really, coming through this draw. 7-6, 6-4, 7-5 over Gerasimov in the second round. Faced the hot and cold Fernando Verdasco in round 3, came through 6-2, 6-2, 6-4. Andrei Rublev, in stellar form at the moment, was his opponent in round 4. That one was interesting because Rublev was an underdog for many coming into this clash, and is a player who's kind of similar stages to Zverev in terms of amount of time spent on tour, age, etc. Zverev came through 6-4, 6-4, 6-4. And then Stan Wawrinka in the quarterfinals. Zverev came through in 4 sets, 1-6, 6-3, 6-4, 6-2. Impressive because it was a lopsided first set and then a tight opening to the second. But Zverev just kept his head down, looked for options, and was able to find a way through. His double fault issues that have plagued him, or had plagued him, last season and indeed at the beginning of this season, seem out the window. One double fault to 13 aces for